Yes, it's true. I'm wearing a dress. You have no idea what a concession that is for me to wear a dress. For you, for this, for the Noir series, for They Write by Night, I'm wearing a dress. I don't have anything against them. I think they're okay, but I put on a dress, I look at myself in the mirror and I go, why am I all dressed up? Is it a wedding? Is it a funeral? Am I going to meet the Queen? Am I going to meet Benicio del Toro? Usually it's not a wedding, it's not a funeral. I'm not going to meet the Queen, and I'm never going to meet Benicio del Toro. So I take off the damn dress. But for you, the dress. All right, let's get to what we're talking about today. Mood and atmosphere. Now, that sometimes doesn't get considered in film noir or the poem noir. People think, oh, the man, the woman, the plotting to kill the husband, the gun, the murder. But there's also something that surrounds all the characters, everything that's going on. There is this atmosphere of dread, right? Of menace. And in some of the best movies, there's also a sense of climate, a sense of temperature. We're going to talk about two movies that they both have a sultry element. The first one is body heat. The climate is sultry. It's Florida. It's Florida in a heat wave. And there is a character named Maddie, played stunningly by the magnificent Kathleen Turner. She provides so much sultriness that it would be sultry even if it was 0 degrees. So a sultriness, that's sexuality, right? Now, the other one we're going to talk about is to have and have not. That's set in Martinique, 1940, Vichy, France, under German occupation. And the sultriness, well, it's black and white. When we don't quite get as much conversation about the heat as we do in body heat, where the rather second, third-rate attorney named Ned meets Maddie in his opening line. He walks over to, he watches her come down the aisle, right, of a auditorium, and just very bold in her white and her sort of plunging gown white, very proud. Her head is always up, her hair is always flowing, and she walks outside and leans against the railing with the ocean behind them. And then he comes along, never spoken to her in his life, and his opening line is, "You can stand next to me as long as you promise not to talk about the heat." So there's a lot of conversation in there about the heat. Very sexy movie, right? And to have and have not, they don't talk about it as much, but it is Martinique off the coast of Cuba, summer, August. And Lauren Bacall provides the sultriness in her first role. And it's interesting to contrast Kathleen Turner and Lauren Bacall, because Lauren Bacall in her first role, she'd been a model, and she grew up poor in a poor Jewish family in the Bronx and had never been in a movie. She was so nervous that in order to keep her chin from shaking, she had to hold her head down and sort of look up with her chin down. And that created what came to be known as the look, this very sly, very feline, very knowing. But with Kathleen Turner, her head is always thrown back, sort of in a taunting way, just flung back, the exact opposite. And yet, when people saw Kathleen Turner's performance, they likened her to Lauren Bacall. Both of them very sexy in their own way. Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart fell in love during the making of the movie, so that the heat you see going on is real. Now, I have a poem that pulls these two movies together into one poem. It's by Diann Blakely. Diann Blakely was a poet who was raised in the South. I think she summered in Florida too, according to this poem. And the poem I'm going to read that draws together, that winds together these two movies, it's a sestina. A sestina uses 6 words. You have to end on these 6 words in a prescribed order. The rotation, the words keep rolling around in a different order. And what I'm holding up here is an issue of a magazine that survived for several long years and then just finally stopped production this year. I was the California correspondent of it. Malpais Review. Malpais Review, edited by Gary Brower. And in it, I wrote my defining essay, The Poem Noir, Too Dark to Be Depressed. And in each of these poems that I use to show what the poem noir is, I make a little statement about the poem coming up and why I think it's noir. I interview myself. So I ask myself a question and I answer the question. SUZANNE Lummis, what might be the perfect traditional poetic form for noir? And SUZANNE Lummis says, probably the sestina with its sense of entrapment, the rotation of those 6 recurring words that bind you to a condition you can't break free of. What am I using for a bookmark these days? York Square Liquor, 6312 York Square Boulevard, Los Angeles. I have no recollection of making a purchase at York Square Liquor. I must have bought a lot of liquor. Don't remember a thing. Diann Blakely, Duplex Noir. At dusk, stars fizzle in this landlocked sky, and TV screens turn blue like smoke rising from my neighbor's grill. Smoke perfumed with meat and already spilled booze. They've bought enough. Bourbon for backslapping men, gin and tonic for those first dates, white wine for moms who call their sitters every hour. You haven't called. My set darkens with Florida night sky, Hurt and Turner sweating over tonics slopped with rum, the tang of cut limes rising as they plot to kill her husband. Enough. I've seen body heat twice before, Maddie and Ned scheming to make Richard Crenna meet. Dead, burned meat between drinks and fucks and calls dialed from payphones. I've never had enough of Florida. Seared breeze and mackerel skies at sundown, my sand-crusted knees rising from castles left to watery Teutonics, as my parents' gins lightly splashed with tonic, picked at olives, cheese, coals, sliced meats, and sang my name, their slurred voices rising like the waves. Channel 8, Lauren Bacall in Martinique, monochromatic skies and rum runner Bogart, who's had enough of Vichy thugs, who's never been loved enough, as any dame can see. The movies are tonic but addictive for little girls too shy to play with boys who cry into their meat at dinners years later when boys don't call. And when they do, when her father's shouts rise and shake her bedroom walls, the volume rises next door where they've had more than enough. The married and the single both. One call, that's all it would take. And what's more tonic than flesh on flesh? I could arrange to meet you anytime. Stars vibrate in the sky, now black, among rising wires, trays of tonic and leftover booze. They burned enough meat to call for pizza. Late news. No end of skies. Joe was supposed to call me today. What's with that? We're supposed to meet at House of Pies on Vermont Avenue sometime before midnight. Well, now that's interesting. I won't read too much into it. But he'd better call me. All right, that last little envoy, last 3 lines, the poet has got to get all 6 words into the last 3 lines in a way that makes sense and fits the poem and doesn't seem forced. She was damn good. Diann Blakely. Who knows which were the... Okay, did you figure out the 6 words? Okay, think about it for a second. The 6 words, what were they? Okay, you give up? Ha, they give up. Okay, I'm going to tell you. Rises, enough, call, tonic, meat, sky. And sometimes she did something witty with one of the words, like sometimes instead of meat, well, it's M-E-E-T, M-E-A-T, and then in one place she has Maddie instead of meat, right? So you can kind of play around with it a little bit, stretch the rules. Something interesting about Diann Blakely. And in fact, there's a Diann Blakely connection with Kathleen Turner. Diann Blakely wrote Poems Noir. She was fascinated with film noir the way I was, maybe for different reasons, right? And this is, I have a good image here from one of her last book, Cities of Flesh and the Dead, right? Okay, and it is from Elixir Press. So it's interesting how the tragedies that occur in life are different from the tragedies that occur in film noir. And Kathleen Turner has a stunning career, but her career was stalled because she got rheumatoid arthritis, and it changed her shape, and it made her an invalid for a long time, and changed the course of her career. And she suffered terribly badly. And when you see her character in Body Heat, she seems invincible. Nothing could touch that woman. That's what I love about noir. It gives you a sense, it connects with this world in certain ways, but it also gives you an alternative world that's appealing in its own respect, that responds to a certain fantasy. In that movie, she is an evil woman, a brilliant, conniving, shrewd, cunning character who stays a step ahead of everybody. And they realize it the whole way along. She was a step ahead of them, and she triumphs. That kind of triumph, not so common in life. So she herself was struck by this illness. Diann Blakely died in 2014. She was struck with a terribly serious lung disease that was inherent in her family and confined her to her home. So in the last years of her life, she could barely leave her home. What she cared about, what she wanted at the end of her life, was for her poetry to endure. I want it to endure too. Good night, ladies. Good night, gentlemen. And remember, always look both ways, watch your back, and don't let anybody treat you like you're two for a dime.